The moment I stepped into my son's house and heard him scream, I knew something had cracked in me for good. Scrub the toilet. I said scrub it. Ronald's voice bounced off the tile walls like he was commanding a soldier, not speaking to a child. I hadn't even closed the door behind me. My coat was still buttoned. The birthday gift I held for my granddaughter slipped slightly in my grip. Then I saw her, little Jenny, 7 years old, standing on a step stool in the downstairs bathroom, holding a sponge that looked far too big for her hand. Her head was bowed like she was afraid to exist. I walked in without knocking. "Ronald," I said evenly, "what on earth are you doing?" He turned, startled. His face flushed the way it always had when he was caught doing something shameful. "Mom, what are you doing here already? You were supposed to come at 6. "I came early. I brought Jenny her present." I looked past him at the girl. Her cheeks were red, her lower lip trembling. Ronald stepped closer to me, his voice dropping into that tone I'd grown to hate, the one where he pretended to be calm, reasonable. "She lied about cleaning the sink yesterday. If I don't teach her consequences now, she'll never learn." "She's 7, I said flatly. "Exactly. That's when it starts." "No," I said, walking toward Jenny, kneeling to her level. "What starts is fear and shame, and the quiet belief that love can be taken away just like that." Jenny looked up at me with wide eyes. I saw my late husband in them, the same pale blue, the same softness. I reached out, took the sponge from her hand, and placed it gently in the sink. Then I stood up, looked Ronald dead in the eyes, and said, "I think it's time we talked about the deed." That shut him up. We stood there in silence, the three of us, one angry, one trembling, and one old woman who had finally reached her limit. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the ticking of the wall clock. I reached for Jenny's hand and said, "Put your shoes on, sweetheart. We're going to Grandma's." Ronald followed me as I turned, his voice low and hard. "You can't just take her like that." I stopped in the hallway. "I'm not just doing anything." "You'll be getting a call shortly." He looked confused. He didn't remember. Of course he didn't. 3 years ago, when he was neck-deep in credit card debt and trying to refinance, he'd come to me in a panic. "If I transfer the deed to you," he'd said, "we can get better rates. It's just a formality. You're not going to actually do anything with it." I remember how he smiled when he said it, like it was all a clever little game and I was just a harmless piece in it. He forgot that I kept the paperwork, and the notarized copies, and the email from the mortgage officer confirming that, yes, the title now belonged to me. So when I said, "We need to talk about the deed," I wasn't bluffing. I never bluffed. Jenny came out of the bathroom slipping on her sneakers. Her small backpack was on the floor. She picked it up wordlessly and stood by the door. Ronald's wife, Nancy, finally appeared from the upstairs landing, drawn by the voices. "What's going on?" she asked, tightening her robe. Her hair was pinned up, as always. Cold eyes, dismissive tone. That's what I remembered most when I thought of her. I never liked her, though I tried. "Your husband is screaming at your child like she's a delinquent," I said. "I'm taking her for the night." Nancy crossed her arms. "You can't do that." "I just did." She looked at Ronald. "Do something." But he stood there, blinking, and I knew in that moment he wasn't thinking about Jenny, or me. He was trying to remember something, some detail from 3 years ago, some signature, trying to guess whether I was serious. I opened the front door. The evening air was cool and smelled faintly of cut grass. Jenny followed me out. She didn't say a word, just reached up and took my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. My car was parked down the street. As we walked, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not grief. Something older. Something like steel. I had spent 78 years trying to be polite, helpful, supportive. I raised a son through hardship, through the death of my husband, through working 2 jobs and forgetting what it felt like to sleep in. I gave him everything I had. Money, time, the soft parts of myself. And now he shouted at a child to scrub a toilet while his wife stood upstairs painting her nails? And he thought I'd just watch? He had no idea what I remembered, or what I was still capable of. I opened the car door, and Jenny climbed into the back seat without hesitation. I buckled her in. She looked up at me, and for the first time that day, she whispered, "Thank you." I closed the door and walked around to the driver's side. By the time we pulled into my driveway, the sun had dipped below the rooftops. My old house, paint chipping on the porch, suddenly looked like a sanctuary. I had never planned to become anyone's guardian again, but life has a way of offering you one more chance to do the right thing, if you're brave enough to take it. And I was. 3 years ago, Ronald sat in this very kitchen, sipping coffee from a mug he didn't bother to rinse afterward. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up like he'd just come back from war. Not a desk job. He looked tired, or maybe just calculating. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. "It's just a formality, Mom," he'd said, pushing a stack of papers toward me. "The bank's giving us hell with the rates. If the house is in your name, we qualify for a different tier. Nothing changes, really. You won't even notice." I remember staring at the dotted line, his pen already uncapped and placed carefully to the side, like bait. The kitchen clock ticked loudly that afternoon. The air smelled like cinnamon. I'd just pulled a pie out of the oven. He knew I baked when I was stressed. He knew I wouldn't say no when he looked that tired. "But what if something happens?" I had asked. "What if you and Nancy, break up?" He chuckled. "Mom, we're not going anywhere. Come on, you've seen us, we're solid." Solid like dry plaster. I had seen them. I'd heard the clipped tones, the eye rolls, the slammed drawers when they thought Jenny was asleep. But I didn't argue. I signed. Because back then, I still believed being a good mother meant being agreeable. The paperwork had been handled by his mortgage broker, a polite woman named Cheryl who assured me, "Everything's in order, Mrs. Johnson. Just a standard property title transfer." I asked for a copy. She looked mildly surprised but gave me one anyway. I went home and put it in the drawer with the birth certificates and marriage license under a folder labeled Important. I never brought it up again. Until now. As Jenny sat at my kitchen table that evening, dangling her legs over the chair's edge, I warmed up leftovers. Nothing fancy, just rice and baked chicken. But she ate like she hadn't had a proper meal in days. I didn't say much. Neither did she. Her silence was not the silence of shyness. It was the silence of a child learning not to take up too much space. When she finished, I handed her a warm washcloth and helped her wipe her face. Then I brought out the little wrapped box I'd originally come to deliver. She opened it slowly, careful not to tear the paper. Nancy had taught her to be careful with things, especially gifts. Inside was a small silver bracelet with a single charm, a book. Jenny loved to read, even though no one in that house seemed to notice. Her eyes lit up. "Do you like it?" She nodded quickly. "It's like the one you have." I smiled. "That's exactly why I got it. Now we match. She slipped it on and looked down at her wrist like it meant something. Maybe it did. Maybe matching bracelets were a promise that she wasn't alone anymore. After she went to bed, tucked into the guest room with my old quilt and a nightlight I hadn't used in years, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and pulled out the folder. There it was. The deed transfer, signed and notarized. The property, in full, belonged to Martha Elaine Johnson. Me. I stared at the paper for a long time. It was strange how something so cold, so transactional, could now feel like a lifeline. I had let Ronald talk me into it, not because I wanted the house, but because I wanted to help. I always wanted to help. That was the problem. But now this paper meant I had options. Control. A say in what happened next. I reached for the landline. I never got used to those tiny smartphone screens, and dialed my lawyer's number. Richard Ames. He'd been our family attorney since my husband was alive. He always picked up on the second ring. "Mrs. Johnson," he said warmly, "what can I do for you?" "I need to know what legal rights I have over a property I own, specifically if the residents are not listed as tenants, and there is no lease." He didn't hesitate. "If it's in your name and there's no lease, you can ask them to leave. If they refuse, you can proceed with formal eviction. It's not pleasant, but it's your right." "I don't want to do anything rash," I said, "but I need to know where I stand." "You stand firmly," he replied. "Would you like me to draft a notice?" "Not yet, but I might." After I hung up, I sat in the silence for a long time. Jenny was asleep. The house felt different with her in it. Lighter. Like it remembered what it felt like to be needed for the right reasons. I thought back to Ronald's voice, barking at her to scrub a toilet. Not a chore. A punishment. Humiliation, disguised as discipline. He'd learned that somewhere. Maybe from his father, though Derek had never raised his voice like that. Maybe from the world, or maybe from me, from watching me stay quiet too many times. No more. The next morning, I made pancakes. Jenny ate 3. She smiled when I let her pour syrup without measuring. After breakfast, we sat on the porch swing, and I read to her from an old book, Charlotte's Web. She leaned against me, small and soft and warm, and I thought, I can do this. One more time, I can do this. By noon, I had written a letter. Simple, direct, and notarized. I wasn't evicting them, not yet. But I was asserting ownership and setting terms. If Ronald and Nancy wanted to stay in my house, they'd start paying rent. Fair market value, monthly, in writing. And they'd treat Jenny like a human being. Or I'd see to it that the courts understood what kind of home she was living in. I placed the letter in an envelope, addressed it to their home, my home, technically, and walked it to the mailbox. Then I went back inside and brewed another cup of tea. The wind outside was picking up. The sky was full of movement. So was I. I didn't expect Nancy to be the first to respond. But by noon the next day, my landline rang sharp and fast, like it had something to prove. "Martha," she began, not even bothering with a hello. Her voice was high and clipped, the way it always got when she felt exposed. "What is this letter? Ronald just read it, and frankly, we're confused." I sipped my tea, let her sit in her own silence a moment. "It's quite clear, I think. I own the house. You live in the house. If you wish to continue doing so, you'll pay rent. Martha, we are family. So is Jenny. Yet that didn't stop you from letting her be shouted at like she was a maid. That was taken out of context. I was standing there, Nancy. There was no context." She huffed. "Ronald is trying to raise a responsible child. You're undermining him." I let that hang between us like a coat I refused to pick up. Then perhaps a responsible man can responsibly sign a lease and pay rent like any other adult. And in the meantime, his daughter is staying with me. You can't just take her. She wasn't taken. She walked. With me. Willingly. You're kidnapping her. I nearly laughed. Do you hear yourself? But there was no humor in it. Just fatigue. How many times had I let this woman push me aside with that brittle smile of hers, calling my holiday pies quaint, my stories long, my visits unexpected. I thought I was doing the noble thing by staying quiet, staying helpful. But silence is a slow death when no one's listening. I'll remind you, I said slowly, that I have documented ownership of the property you and Ronald live in. If I wanted to, I could give you 30 days, but I'm giving you a chance. Be civil. Step up. Do better. She hung up on me. That afternoon, I found Jenny on the floor of my living room, drawing quietly with a box of colored pencils I'd kept for years, leftovers from when Ronald was small. She looked up as I entered. "Grandma?" she asked softly. "Is Daddy mad?" I sat beside her, careful not to crush the paper. "Maybe, but not at you." She nodded, then whispered, "He gets loud when things aren't clean." "Does that happen often?" She shrugged. That small, tired shrug children use when they've already decided that speaking makes things worse. I looked at the drawing. A house, a tree, and a girl with a gray-haired woman, both smiling. No toilets in sight. "You're safe here," I said. She leaned into me, and we sat like that for a long while. Later that night, Ronald called. His voice was quieter than Nancy's, but tighter, like someone clenching their jaw while trying to sound composed. "Mom, can we talk?" "We're talking. I don't understand. You really think rent is fair? I think expecting your elderly mother to give you free housing while you yell at her granddaughter is what's unfair. She lied to me. She said she cleaned the bathroom and didn't. She's 7, Ronald. She has to learn. No. You have to learn that this house isn't yours. That child isn't your scapegoat. And I'm not your doormat." Silence. "You're punishing us." "I'm setting boundaries. You're free to decline. But you'll need to find another place to live if you do." Another pause. I could almost hear Nancy whispering in the background. "We'll get back to you," he said finally, and hung up. The next morning, the mail brought a response. Not a check. A letter. 2 pages, typed. Nancy's voice all over it. Formal, defensive, legalistic. They were considering the terms, but had concerns about the legitimacy of the ownership transfer. As if I hadn't signed every paper with a witness. As if I hadn't been the one bailing them out 3 years ago. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I made grilled cheese sandwiches for Jenny. She grinned when I let her flip one in the pan. "You trust me with the stove?" she asked. "I trust you with more than that," I said. After lunch, we sat on the porch. The sun was warm but gentle, and the wind moved through the trees like it had nowhere better to be. "I like it here," she said. "So do I." She was quiet for a while. Then, "Are you going to make them move?" "I don't know yet. But they're going to have to decide, do better or do it elsewhere." She nodded, and then did something that nearly broke me. She reached over, took my hand, and said, "You're the only one who sees me." I didn't cry, but only because I couldn't afford to. That evening, I called Richard again, my lawyer. Told him about the letter. He sighed. "They're bluffing," he said. "But if they want to go to court, we'll be ready." "What are the chances they'd get custody of Jenny?" He paused. "They'd have to prove you're unfit, with witnesses, records, which, from what you're telling me, would be difficult for them, especially if the child testifies." "I don't want to drag her into anything. You might not have a choice, but I'll guide you." I hung up and looked around my quiet, small house. Nothing fancy, faded wallpaper, a creaky hallway. But it was clean, peaceful, safe. Let them bluff. Let them threaten. I was done backing down. The first time Jenny told me what her father did when he was angry, she didn't speak. She showed me. It was Saturday morning. I'd promised her pancakes, and she was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through an old children's cookbook I'd saved from when Ronald was small. Her small fingers traced the pictures. She didn't say much. She rarely did, unless I asked the right kind of questions. Gentle ones, with no traps inside them. "Do you like blueberry or banana better?" I asked, whisking the batter. She hesitated, then pointed. "Blueberry?" I smiled. Excellent choice. As I turned back to the stove, I caught her out of the corner of my eye. She was reaching slowly under the sleeve of her sweatshirt, as if scratching her arm. But when I looked again, I saw she wasn't scratching. She was pulling the fabric back, deliberately, like she wanted me to notice. There was a faint bruise, purple, yellow, fading now, but unmistakable. I put the spatula down. "Sweetheart," I said, careful with each word. "How did that happen?" She froze. Didn't answer. Just pulled the sleeve back down and stared at her lap. "Jenny," I said again, softly, "you're safe here. You can tell me anything." She didn't cry. She just said, "He grabbed me. Not hard. Just when I didn't move fast enough." I sat beside her. "How often does that happen?" She shrugged. That same heartbreaking shrug. The one I was beginning to hate. Not because of her, but because it said more than words ever could. "Does your mommy know?" "She says I make him frustrated, that I need to listen better." I had to look away then, just for a moment. The pan on the stove was beginning to smoke. I stood up, turned off the burner, and let the silence settle. When I sat back down, I took her hand gently. "That is not your fault," I said. "Ever." She nodded, but I wasn't sure if she believed me. Not yet. That afternoon, I called Richard again, told him about the bruise. He was quiet for a moment. "You need to document it," he said. "Take a photo, with a timestamp, and if it happens again, we go to court." I hung up, then went to the hallway closet, pulled out an old Polaroid. I didn't want to scare her with a phone, didn't want her to think she was in trouble. I waited until we were coloring later that day and gently asked if I could take a picture of her bracelet, the one I'd given her. She smiled and held out her wrist. I took the photo, making sure to frame just enough to show the bruise. I slipped the picture into an envelope marked for Richard. That evening, I got an email from Nancy. No greeting, no warmth, just one sentence. "If this continues, we'll be forced to involve social services." I stared at the screen. My first instinct was fear. What if they twisted things? What if they made it look like I was the threat? Then I remembered the way Jenny flinched when a glass fell from the dish rack yesterday, how her shoulders tensed before she realized no one was going to yell. I remembered the bruise. Let them come, I thought. Let them bring whoever they like. I had nothing to hide. Could they say the same? The next morning, I made an appointment with a therapist, not for me, but for Jenny. I told her it was like story time, but with a grown-up who listens really well. She asked, "Will they tell Daddy?" "No," I said. "Not unless you want them to." She nodded, quietly. That's all I needed. We walked to the office on Maple Street, hand in hand. The therapist, a kind woman named Angela, had soft eyes and warm hands. She invited Jenny to draw. I waited outside. After the session, Angela stepped out. "She's scared, but she's resilient," she said. "She trusts you." I nodded, grateful. Then I added, "Please keep notes. We may need them." That night, as I tucked Jenny into bed, she looked up at me and asked, "If I say I want to stay here forever, will they let me?" I brushed the hair from her face. "We're going to do everything we can to make sure you're safe and happy. That's a promise." She was asleep within minutes. I stayed beside her, watching her chest rise and fall in the steady rhythm of a child finally at peace. I thought about all the times I'd stayed silent, all the years I'd let Ronald dismiss me, speak over me, take my kindness for granted. I'd done it because I thought that was what mothers did. They endured. They adjusted. They kept giving. But there's a difference between endurance and erasure. I wasn't going to disappear anymore. Not for him. Not for Nancy. And certainly not for the sake of keeping the peace in a home where a child was afraid to exist. The envelope arrived 3 days later, hand-delivered by a courier in a cheap suit who didn't make eye contact. I opened it at the kitchen table while Jenny was outside, helping me sweep leaves from the porch. Inside, 3 things. A typed letter from Ronald's lawyer, one of those self-important boutique firms that advertise on bus stops. A formal request to return custody of minor child Jennifer Marie Johnson to her parents without further interference. And a veiled threat. Should I refuse, they would initiate legal proceedings for custodial interference and elder instability. I read it twice, then a third time. The phrase elder instability made me laugh, but not the kind of laugh that feels good, the kind that sits in your chest and twists. So that's the story they were going to tell. That I was unstable, that I'd lost my grip, that I was confused or lonely or emotional. They'd make it sound like I wandered into their lives and snatched Jenny out of her bed. Not that I walked in on my son barking at a child like a prison warden. Not that I had the deed to their house in my filing cabinet. Not that I was the only one paying attention. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then I picked up the phone and called Richard. "We move forward," I said. "You want to file formal notice?" "Yes." "And the child?" "She stays with me. If they want to fight, we'll let the court see the bruises, the therapist's notes, the photographs. Let them explain why their 7-year-old doesn't want to go home." He was quiet for a moment. "I'll draft the paperwork." After we hung up, I stood at the window and watched Jenny dancing between leaf piles. Her laughter rose into the air like wind chimes. I thought of all the things she hadn't said yet, all the fear that still lived just under her skin. And I thought of the word they'd used in that letter. Unstable? No. What I was done. That evening, I typed my own letter. To Ronald. No lawyer this time, no threats, just words. "Ronald, I received your lawyer's letter. I expected it. Let me be clear, I am not interfering. I am protecting. I saw what you did. I heard how you spoke. And Jenny, your daughter, has shown me enough to know that your house is not a safe place for her right now. You will not bully me with paperwork. You will not discredit me with cheap language and false narratives. You will either face what you've become or you will be removed from the house and from her life. I didn't raise you to be this man, but I did raise myself to be the woman who stands up to him. Mom, I printed it, signed it, sealed it, and mailed it. The next morning, I got a knock on the door. Not the postman, not a neighbor. A woman in a navy blazer with a laminated badge. "Mrs. Johnson?" she asked. "I'm from Child Protective Services." Of course. I invited her in. Jenny was at school. I'd enrolled her locally, just a temporary registration, but enough. The woman, Ms. Harris, was polite but firm. She asked about our arrangement, about the bruises, the therapist, the living conditions. I answered everything. Then I took her to the hallway cabinet and showed her the file. Photographs, legal documents, therapy notes, deed to the house. She flipped through the papers in silence. After 10 minutes, she looked up. "She seems safe here." She is. Her parents claim I know what they claim. I also know what she draws at night and what she dreams about. She talks in her sleep, you know. Apologizes. Begs to try harder. You tell me, does that sound like a stable home? Ms. Harris closed the folder. "We'll continue the evaluation. There may be a hearing. You'll be notified." I nodded. "I'll be ready." She stood, glanced around the house one more time. Her eyes softened a little when they landed on the fridge, covered in Jenny's crayon masterpieces. "Looks like she's found her color again," she said quietly. When she left, I sat down and exhaled. Not from fear, from resolve. I knew the battle had truly begun. By Sunday afternoon, the neighborhood knew. It didn't take much. A single visit from Child Protective Services, an unfamiliar car parked outside for more than 20 minutes, and Mrs. Langley, from 2 houses down, happened to be pruning her roses, which in truth was just code for watching everyone else's lives from behind a trellis of excuses. By Monday morning, the story had grown legs and teeth. At the grocery store, I heard it whispered near the green beans. "They say she took the child, just up and took her. Isn't she 70-something? 78, but sharp as ever. Used to be a teacher, didn't she?" "No, that was her sister. Martha ran the church library. She was always a bit particular." I didn't flinch. I didn't turn. I picked up a can of soup, read the label like it mattered deeply, and moved on. At the post office, the clerk looked at me with new hesitation. Not fear, just that cautious sympathy people offer when they're not sure whether you're a victim or the villain. Back home, the quiet was louder. Even the crows seemed to have opinions. Jenny was still at school, where the story had taken root in other ways. Whispered among staff, not students. Her teacher called me gently that afternoon. "She's doing well," Ms. Carpenter said. "Quiet, but focused, and polite. Very polite." I thanked her. "And Martha?" she added. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing. Some of us, we see more than we say." That stayed with me. But the hardest part came on Wednesday. My front doorbell rang, and when I opened it, there stood June Langley in full floral armor. Blouse, slacks. Even her shoes matched the hydrangeas on her collar. "I brought a pie," she said. That wasn't kindness. That was reconnaissance. I took it anyway. She stepped inside, looked around as if memorizing the layout for later retelling. "We've all been talking," she said after a pause, settling on my couch without invitation. "Of course, everyone's concerned. It's unusual. What's happening? Is it? Well, it's not every day a grandmother takes custody of her granddaughter." I didn't take anything. I stepped in. She nodded, pursing her lips. But don't you think it would be easier for everyone if you just returned her home? There it was. The old suggestion, dressed up in neighborly tone. The easier way. The quieter path. The be a good woman advice wrapped in concern. I sat across from her, folded my hands, and said, June, I'd rather live in a house full of whispers than send a child back to a place where she flinches when someone drops a spoon. She blinked. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. You just didn't think I'd say it out loud. She left soon after. I didn't walk her to the door. That night, Jenny asked, Why are people talking about us? I thought about how to answer. Then I said, Because when someone finally says no, the people who always said yes get uncomfortable. She didn't quite understand. But one day, she would. Later, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No name, no return address. Inside was a note, typed, unsigned. You should be ashamed of yourself. That child belongs with her parents. I put the letter in the trash without blinking. Shame had left me long ago, around the time my son yelled at his daughter for leaving a toothpaste cap off, then told me I was being emotional when I objected. Let the town talk. Let the neighbors fidget. I was no longer available for polite injustice. It started with toast. Jenny buttered it herself one morning. 2 slices, slightly burnt on the edges, the way she liked. I watched her from the kitchen table, pretending to read the paper. Her small fingers held the knife steady, careful not to tear the bread. No one had told her she was clumsy. No one was standing over her shoulder sighing or correcting. You want jam? I asked. She smiled. Strawberry. I passed the jar and watched her scoop a modest spoonful, spread it with intention. Like it mattered. Like she mattered. That was the first small victory. The second came later that week when I enrolled her in the community library's Saturday story hour. Just walking through the doors made her light up. Row after row of books, big windows pouring in light. A place where she didn't have to be quiet because she was afraid, but quiet because it felt safe. After we got her a library card, she held it with both hands like it was a passport. In a way, it was. When we got home, she arranged her books in neat piles on the nightstand. I want to read all of them, she said. Even the thick ones. You will, I told her. 1 page at a time. That night, she fell asleep with a copy of The Secret Garden on her chest. She slept through the night. No crying, no muttering, no clenched fists in her dreams. Another victory. At school, her teacher sent home notes, not about misbehavior or missed assignments, but about her progress, her curiosity, her quiet kindness. She helped another student organize their backpack. One note read, "No one asked her to." I didn't show Jenny the note right away. I waited until we were planting tulip bulbs in the yard that Saturday. "You've got a reputation," I said. She looked up, smudges of dirt on her nose. "What kind?" "The kind that makes other kids feel calmer." She thought about that. "That's good, right?" "That's rare." She smiled and went back to digging. The house had changed too. I don't mean paint or furniture. It was still the same creaky place with windows that needed resealing and a front step that groaned when you stepped on it just right. But the air felt different, more open, as if it had exhaled. We developed small routines. Tea after school, drawing on Sundays, puzzle nights. I taught her how to fold towels neatly, not because it was expected, but because it made the cupboard look like a calm little secret. I told her she could decorate her room however she liked. She chose stars, glow-in-the-dark ones. We spent a whole afternoon sticking them to the ceiling. Do you think they'll really glow? She asked. If we believe in them enough. And they did. On the following Monday, she got invited to a classmate's birthday party. First one in over a year, she said. I packed a small gift, a puzzle and some stickers, and dropped her off with a little lump in my throat. 2 hours later, I waited outside in the car. She came out bouncing, her hair messy from the bounce house, her cheeks red from running. I won at musical chairs, she shouted. I didn't wince. I cheered. That night, over mac and cheese, she told me about the games, the cake, the boy who cried because he didn't get the biggest balloon. She laughed. Really laughed. And just like that, I realized we were no longer surviving. We were living. Of course, there were still shadows. She still asked sometimes if her father was mad. She still checked the back seat of the car before getting in, a habit I hadn't questioned until I noticed it happening more than once. But each day, the tension eased from her shoulders a little more. The fear softened. And me? I'd stopped checking the mailbox with dread, stopped wondering what the neighbors were whispering, stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, because the only thing falling now was the late autumn leaves, and we were too busy raking them into piles, just to jump through them. It was a Thursday, cloudy, unremarkable, the kind of day that makes you believe in routine again. Jenny was at school. I'd just finished folding laundry when I heard it, the sharp knock. Not the mailman's knock, not a neighbor's timid tap. This one had weight behind it. Purpose. When I opened the door, there he stood. Ronald. Hair slicked back like it always was when he wanted to look serious. Shirt tucked in too tightly, jaw clenched. He looked like a man trying to dress like a boy, trying to look like a man. The layers of pretense never sat right on him. I need to talk to you, he said. I didn't answer. Just stepped aside. Let him in. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of drama on the porch. He walked into the living room like he still owned it. Eyes scanning, hands in pockets, but not from nerves, from habit. You've made a mess of this, Mom. There it was. His opening line. Not how are you? Not how's Jenny? Not even why are you doing this? Just blame, as if I were a disobedient employee. I sat down in my chair. He stayed standing. You think you can just keep her? He asked, voice low but shaking. She's my daughter. I looked up at him. She's a child, not a trophy. He ignored that. Nancy's furious. She's talking to a new lawyer. Let her talk. The last one's letter didn't hold up. She's not sleeping. She's losing weight. I tilted my head. Jenny or Nancy? He flinched. Then, you know she cries at night, right? Asking for her mother? That stung, but I didn't let it show. She also flinches when someone drops a fork, I said. She checks the car before getting in. She asks permission to go to the bathroom. She's always been sensitive. No, Ronald. She's been scared. And you knew it. You just didn't care. He ran a hand through his hair. You're twisting everything. Am I? You're making me out to be some monster. You're doing that yourself. He sat then, finally, right on the edge of the couch like he was about to bolt. I didn't come here to fight, he said. I came because I want her back. She's not a wallet you left behind. He slammed his hand against his knee. For God's sake, Mom, I'm her father. And I'm your mother. And I watched you scream at a little girl like she was your employee. I watched you twist discipline into something that made her shrink. He looked down, jaw tight. I could see the argument running out of him, replaced by something uglier. shame curdling into anger. You're ruining my family. I stood up, slowly, not because I was weak, but because I wanted the moment to breathe. No, I said. I'm saving a part of it. Silence stretched. You can fix this, I said quietly. Apologize. Get help. Show her something different. And what? You just keep her here? Let her think this is her new home? I didn't answer right away. I walked to the mantel, picked up a photograph. Ronald, age 9, missing a front tooth, holding a fishing rod with his father's hand steadying his shoulder. I remember when you caught your first fish, I said. You were so proud and terrified. You didn't want to touch it, remember? He didn't respond. Your father didn't laugh at you. He didn't scold you. He said, "It's okay to be afraid. Let's figure it out together." I set the photo back down, turned to him. That's the man I wanted you to be. That's the father your daughter needs. He stared at the floor, then stood. I'll see you in court, he said, and walked out. He didn't slam the door. That would have required conviction. He closed it gently, like he was still pretending he had control. When the quiet settled again, I didn't cry. I didn't boil with rage. I just sat back in my chair and breathed. He wasn't here for Jenny. He was here for power. And for the first time, he didn't get it. It was a Wednesday evening, damp and quiet, the kind where the air feels like it's holding its breath. Jenny came home from school, her backpack unusually heavy, her steps unusually light. I have something to show you, she said, her eyes bright. I was peeling apples for pie, but I set the knife down and wiped my hands. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, the kind with glitter stars stuck to the front. She handed it to me with both hands, like it was breakable. It's my writing assignment, she said. We had to write about the most important person in our lives. I opened it slowly. The title read, "The Person Who Makes Me Feel Safe." I read in silence. My grandma makes me feel safe because she listens. She never yells. She asks me how I feel and waits for the answer, even when I don't know what to say. She reads with me, and sometimes she lets me put too much syrup on my pancakes. I wasn't always brave. At home, I felt like I had to be small so no one would get mad. But Grandma says I don't have to shrink to fit. She smells like cinnamon, and her hugs are soft. When I sleep at her house, I don't have scary dreams. I think that's because the scary things are far away. I hope I grow up to be like her. She tells the truth, even when it's hard. She sees people, and she sees me. I didn't move for a moment. Didn't speak. The words were simple, but they landed with the weight of something I hadn't felt in years, a kind of quiet recognition, not praise, not performance, but truth. I looked up. Jenny was watching me. "Well?" she asked, shy now. "I think," I said, voice catching, "it's the best thing anyone's ever written about me." She smiled, relief flooding her features. Then she climbed into my lap, even though she was getting tall for it. "Do you think they'll be mad at me?" she whispered. "Who?" "Daddy. Mommy. If they read it?" I thought for a moment. "They might, but that doesn't make it wrong." She nodded, then added, with that quiet bravery she was beginning to grow into, "I don't think they see me." I wrapped my arms around her. "I do. Always." That night, after she went to bed, I sat in the kitchen with the essay beside me and a cup of tea gone cold. I stared at the photo on the wall, Derek, holding baby Ronald, laughing in the sunlight on our old porch. His face was soft, strong, uncomplicated. "What would you say now?" I whispered. I'd asked that before, in harder times. When Ronald stopped visiting. When Nancy forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. When I sent a check for their roof repair and got no thank you. Just a second request the next month for the car note. I remembered Derek's last year. His body getting weaker, his voice thinning, but his eyes always clear. Before he passed, he told me, "Don't let them take pieces of you until there's nothing left. Not even if it's our own boy." I hadn't listened. Until now. I went to the hall closet and pulled out the old box marked Ronald, 1981-2001. Baby photos, report cards, drawings, cards he made for me on Mother's Day. They were all there. Every scrap of love I had saved. I took out one drawing, a stick figure family in crayon. Me, Mom, Dad, and our dog. No dog, of course. But imagination was always free. I held it, not with nostalgia, but with a kind of mourning. He had been a good boy, thoughtful. Afraid of thunder, quick to say sorry when he knocked something over. When did that boy leave me? When did he become a man who could look at a child's pain and call it discipline? I didn't know. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe it was always there, waiting for no one to say no. I returned the box to the closet. Then I pulled out another, labeled Jenny. It was half full already. Her library card, her first doodle from my fridge, a photo of her planting tulips in the yard, and now, this essay. My second chance was not with my son, it was with her, and I wasn't going to waste it. It happened on a Monday morning, just after I'd walked Jenny to school and returned home to the comforting sounds of a quiet kitchen. Kettle on, radio low, the old floorboards creaking in a rhythm I'd come to trust. The knock was soft, but deliberate. When I opened the door, 2 people stood there. A woman in her 30s, hair in a bun, tablet in hand, and a man I didn't recognize, younger, trying hard to appear neutral. "Mrs. Johnson?" the woman asked. "Yes. We're from Family and Child Services. We're following up on a formal complaint." I didn't blink. "Come in." They stepped inside with the rehearsed politeness of people trained to observe without appearing to judge. But judgment floated in the air all the same. She introduced herself as Ms. Darrow, and the man, Mr. Singh. Their badges were real. Their purpose was clear. They were here to decide if I was fit. "May we look around?" Ms. Darrow asked, already writing something on her screen. "Of course," I said. "Would you like tea?" She declined. Mr. Singh nodded, then caught himself and said no too. That told me everything. They hadn't decided who I was yet. They started with the kitchen. She looked at the stove, the sink, opened a cabinet. Nothing messy, nothing out of place. "Is the child sleeping in a separate room?" she asked. "She has her own room, yes." "May we see it?" I led them down the hall. Jenny's room was still as she'd left it that morning. Made bed, nightlight by the corner, bookshelf with dog-eared covers. A folded sweatshirt rested on her pillow. Ms. Darrow looked around. "She seems organized." "She is," I said. "She likes things where she can find them." They made notes, asked about schooling. I handed them her enrollment form, recent assignments, and a note from her teacher. They asked about health care. I gave them the appointment schedule, immunization records, and her therapy sessions. They asked about my income. I handed over pension stubs and bank statements. They asked if I'd ever been arrested. "No," I said. "Though I once stole a traffic cone when I was 22. College dare." Only Mr. Singh smiled. Back in the living room, they asked more pointed questions. "Was the child's removal from the home discussed with her parents beforehand?" Ms. Darrow asked. "No. It was a protective response. I found my son yelling at her to clean a toilet. She was 7. It wasn't a chore. It was punishment. Any physical harm? She had a bruise on her arm. I have a photograph. Dated. Has she expressed fear? I handed over the therapist's notes. Short, clear, professional. No exaggerations. Just facts. Ms. Darrow read silently. Then she looked at me. Mrs. Johnson, are you aware that Jenny's parents have stated you may be experiencing cognitive decline? There it was. I smiled. Not kindly. Have you spoken to Jenny? We will. Soon. She's the only one whose opinion truly matters in all this. She nodded. We agree. We're just doing our due diligence. Good. So am I. When they left, she said they'd return in a week with preliminary findings, that there might be a hearing, that nothing was final yet. I thanked them for their time, walked them out, and watched their car pull away. Then I sat at the kitchen table. The same one where I'd taught Ronald to tie his shoes. The same one where I'd cried after Derek's funeral. The same one where Jenny had written her essay last week, tongue between her teeth, concentrating like the world depended on each word. Let them investigate. Let them doubt. Let them measure me against a system built to miss women like me. Women who speak quietly, who endure, who break only when no one is looking. But let them also see this house, this child, this truth. Because for the first time in years, I was no longer afraid of being questioned. I was finally ready to be seen. The letter came in a pale pink envelope, the kind you buy in a pack of 50 and use for baby showers and thank you notes. The handwriting was neat, overly neat, as if each curve of each letter had been combed before setting ink to paper. It was from Nancy. I stood in the doorway with it for a moment before opening it. Something about the color unsettled me. Too soft, too sweet, like icing on a cake made from salt. I opened it at the kitchen table, knife still in hand from slicing pears. Martha, I hope this letter finds you well. I've been thinking a lot about everything. The visits, the tension, the confusion surrounding Jenny's place. I realize things may have gotten out of hand, and I'd like to clear the air between us. Ronald and I have talked extensively. We know how much you love Jenny, and we understand that your actions were, in your mind, protective. That said, it's time we move forward. For Jenny's sake. We're prepared to welcome her home immediately. We've arranged for a therapist, we've restructured our schedule to allow for more family time, and we've read your concerns carefully. We're ready to be better. We're asking you to help Jenny transition back. Not with more conflict, but with grace. You've made your point. Now it's time to let us parent. We'd like to pick her up on Sunday. Respectfully, Nancy. No mention of apologies. No mention of yelling, bruises, or fear. No word from Ronald. Only his wife's handwriting, trying to pave over months of silence with something polite and poison sweet. I read the letter twice, then folded it back into its envelope and placed it in the trash. When Jenny came home from school, I didn't tell her about it. Instead, I made her favorite soup, tomato and white bean, and let her tell me about the class guinea pig and how it pooped on someone's math test. After dinner, she sat at the kitchen table doing homework while I washed dishes. I studied her posture. Straight now, no flinch. The hum she made when she was thinking. The way she tapped her pencil when stuck. This was not a child being held hostage. This was a child learning to live. That night when she was asleep, I took the letter out of the trash. Not because I doubted myself, but because I wanted to remember the tone. The way people like Nancy dress up manipulation as maturity. how they use words like grace and respectfully to mask the fact that they never actually said sorry. I brought it to Richard the next morning. He read it in silence. "She's trying to preempt the system," he said. "Get ahead of the findings. If she pulls the girl back now, before a formal report, she can argue it was just a misunderstanding. She thinks I'll give in. Will you?" I looked at him. "You know I won't." He nodded. "Then we'll hold the line." That night, Jenny asked out of nowhere, "Do you think my mom misses me?" I paused. "I think she misses being the one in charge." She didn't ask me to explain. Instead, she climbed into my lap, old habit now, and whispered, "I don't want to go back yet." I held her tighter. "You won't," I said. "Not unless they become the kind of people who deserve you." She relaxed into my shoulder, and for the first time, I believed we might actually win. The letter arrived in a government envelope. Thick paper, no nonsense. Not pink, not sweet. Just the quiet weight of something final. I held it in my hands for a few seconds before opening it, heart steady. Not because I wasn't nervous, but because I had already lived through the real trial. Not the legal one, but the slow erosion of a child's safety, and the choice to stand between her and the people who couldn't see her pain. It was from Family and Child Services, a preliminary custody evaluation report. I sat down, unfolded the pages, and began to read. The home environment provided by Mrs. Martha Johnson is stable, well documented, and conducive to the child's emotional and psychological well-being. The child demonstrates observable signs of improved behavior, reduced anxiety, and greater communication skills during her stay with Mrs. Johnson. The concerns raised in prior complaints regarding the child's original home, including raised voices, inappropriate punishment, and physical bruising, are corroborated by photographs, therapist notes, and the child's own account. Mrs. Johnson has cooperated fully with all requests, provided all necessary documentation in a timely and organized manner, and demonstrated no signs of cognitive decline or instability. Based on the evidence collected, it is our recommendation that temporary guardianship remain with Mrs. Johnson until a formal hearing is held. Visitation with biological parents may be arranged under supervision only. I exhaled slowly. Not joy, not relief, just something close to clarity. Like the fog of months had lifted just enough to let the path ahead show through. That night, I didn't tell Jenny right away. Instead, I picked her up from school like always, walked her home. We made grilled cheese, watered the tulips, sat on the porch swing while she told me a story about a boy in her class who believed ghosts lived in the art room. After dinner, when she was brushing her teeth, I placed the letter on her pillow. She came out minutes later, saw it, read the first few lines, and looked up at me with wide eyes. "They said I can stay?" she asked. "For now," I said. "But yes, they believe you." She didn't cheer. She didn't jump or dance. She just climbed into my lap, leaned her head on my shoulder, and said, "I knew you'd make them listen." I held her there, remembering all the nights I thought I'd failed as a mother. All the years I kept quiet when I should have raised my voice. All the moments I thought that loving quietly was the same as protecting. But this was something else. This was earned. That evening, Richard called. "We'll move to file for extended guardianship," he said. "Given the recommendation, we have a strong case. And if they contest, we're ready. This report changes everything." I thanked him. Then, after we hung up, I stood at the window and watched Jenny in the yard, catching the last golden light between her hands, laughing at nothing. Finally, light again. The war wasn't over, but we'd won the first real battle. And I, an old woman, once told I was too soft, too quiet, too willing, had become someone they could not dismiss. Not with lawyers, not with letters, not with lies. The courthouse smelled like old paper and new fear. We sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 3B, the hall quiet but thick with movement, the kind that doesn't come from sound, but from energy, from nerves, from the knowledge that someone in that room would try to say I didn't belong. Richard sat beside me, calm as ever, papers stacked neatly in his worn leather briefcase. He'd worn the same tie he wore to Derek's probate hearing, a dark navy one with a single gold stripe. Lucky, he called it. I didn't believe in luck. I believed in preparation. Still, I was grateful for the stripe. Jenny wasn't with us. The court had agreed she wouldn't testify today. It was just the preliminary hearing. Nothing binding yet, but enough to start setting the ground for what would come. I'd left her with Angela, her therapist, who offered to spend the morning painting birdhouses with her. She doesn't need to sit through this to know she's safe, Angela had said. I agreed. I hadn't seen Ronald or Nancy yet, but I knew they were close. I could feel their presence, like cold air leaking through a doorframe. You ready? Richard asked gently. No, I said honestly, but we're going anyway. He smiled. That's always been the way. When the bailiff called us in, I stood slowly. My knees ached from the hard bench, and my hands trembled just enough to remind me I was still human. The judge was a woman, mid-50s, silver hair pulled into a bun, eyes that didn't blink unless necessary. I liked her instantly. Nancy and Ronald sat at the other table, their lawyer crisp and tight, expensive watch, cheap eyes. Ronald wouldn't look at me. Nancy did once, and it was like staring into frost. The hearing began. Formalities, statements, a summary of events. Richard stood and spoke plainly. We are not asking for final custody today. We are simply affirming temporary guardianship based on existing recommendations by Family and Child Services, supported by documentation, photographs, and a therapist's evaluation. Their lawyer countered. Mrs. Johnson is not a legal guardian. She is a relative acting emotionally. The child belongs with her parents, who have demonstrated a willingness to improve and cooperate. The judge turned to him. And yet no motion was made to challenge the temporary placement when it began. Why now? He stumbled. They were hoping to resolve it quietly. The judge nodded, unimpressed. Richard handed over a folder, the same one we'd built over weeks. Photographs, notes, schedules, drawings, medical visits, the essay. I watched her eyes scan the pages, slow, intent. She didn't rush. Then, for the first time, she looked directly at me. Mrs. Johnson, she said, why now? After all these years, why intervene? I didn't stand. I just spoke, voice low, clear. Because I was afraid before. I thought love meant silence. I thought raising a child meant giving them space to figure it out, even if that meant they turned cruel. I paused. My voice held. But when I saw my granddaughter flinch at a gentle sound, when I saw bruises explained away as lessons, when I heard a little girl apologize for her existence, I remembered something my husband told me before he died. Don't let them take pieces of you until there's nothing left. I looked at Ronald then. He didn't move. I have one more piece left, I said, and I'm giving it to her. The judge didn't respond right away. She looked back at the file, then at Ronald. "Mr. Johnson," she said, "have you begun therapy, parenting classes, or any documented form of restitution?" He cleared his throat. "We've been looking into it." That was his answer. The judge tapped her pen once, then said, "Temporary guardianship remains with Mrs. Johnson. Visitation rights are suspended pending further review." The gavel didn't fall. It didn't need to. We filed out silently. Outside, in the cold air, Richard touched my elbow. "You did well," he said. "No," I replied. "I did what had to be done." At home, Jenny was waiting on the porch, a smudge of blue paint on her cheek. She ran to me the second she saw my face. "Do I have to go back?" I shook my head. "No, baby, not today, not tomorrow." She clung to me then, small and certain. And for the first time, I realized neither of us was alone anymore. 2 weeks after the hearing, Ronald came to the house alone. No letter, no warning. Just the sound of his car pulling into the gravel and his hesitant footsteps on the path I'd swept that morning. I watched him through the window, hands in pockets, head down, like a schoolboy summoned to the principal's office. I didn't open the door right away. I let him knock twice. When I did, he looked up with that old face of his, the one from before the pride, before the sharpness. The boy who cried when he lost his first tooth and wouldn't let go of my hand during thunderstorms. "I'm not here to fight," he said. I opened the screen door but didn't move aside. "Then what are you here for?" He swallowed. I wanted to talk." I hesitated, then stepped back. He didn't walk in like he used to. He entered slowly, almost carefully, like the walls might judge him. He looked around. "Same furniture?" "Same truth," I said. We sat in the living room, him on the edge of the couch, me in my chair. It felt like a scene from a play I'd already lived. Same posture, same silence. But something was different this time. His hands were shaking. "I started therapy," he said quietly. 3 sessions so far." I didn't reply. "I'm not here to ask for her back. I know it's not the time." Still, I said nothing. "I was a bad father," he added. "And I think I was worse than I even realized. I thought I was teaching discipline, but I was just angry and scared." That word surprised me. "Of what?" He looked down. "Of not being enough, of messing her up, of being seen the way I used to see you, soft, passive. I thought control would protect us." "It never has," I said. "I know that now." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, messy crayon lines, clearly Jenny's. It showed 3 people, a girl, a woman with gray hair, and a man off to the side with a tear on his face. "She gave this to me last year," he said. "I didn't hang it. I didn't even thank her. I just told her to go brush her teeth." He unfolded it carefully and set it on the coffee table between us. "I don't deserve her forgiveness," he said, "but I'd like to earn it." I looked at the drawing, then at him. "You won't earn it by coming here with sad eyes and a new vocabulary," I said. "You'll earn it by staying changed, when no one's watching." He nodded, slowly. "I understand. She's doing well. She's sleeping, eating, drawing again." "I'm glad," he said, and I believed him. He stood after a moment. "I won't come again unannounced," he said. "I just needed you to know I'm trying." I nodded once. "Trying is good, but don't mistake my silence for permission. You have a long road ahead." He smiled, not with confidence, but humility. "I know." As he left, Jenny came home from school. She saw his car pulling away and froze. Was that Daddy? Yes, I said. But just a visit, just a conversation. She looked unsure. Did he yell? She asked. No, I said gently. He listened. She nodded slowly, then changed the subject, asking what was for dinner, as if part of her still needed proof that peace wasn't temporary. That night, after she was asleep, I placed her drawing, the one Ronald brought, on my desk. I didn't hang it. Not yet. But I didn't throw it away either. Because even a broken story deserves a blank page, if someone's willing to write it right this time. It's spring now, the kind that arrives slowly, politely, sunlight pressing through curtains just a bit earlier each day, daffodils blooming like they've decided to forgive the frost. The kind of spring that doesn't shout, but stays. Jenny sleeps in on Saturdays now, not from exhaustion, but from peace. Her breathing is steady in the morning quiet, and I can hear it through the thin wall. A rhythm I didn't know I'd come to rely on. The case isn't closed yet. There are still hearings, still papers, still men in ties who don't remember her favorite color, but think they can decide where she should live. But the edge has dulled. The battle lines have shifted. We're not begging to be heard anymore. We're simply not going anywhere. Last week, I let her paint her bedroom walls, pale blue with soft white stars that glow when the light dies down. I told her it was her sky, and she could fill it however she liked. She painted a moon in the corner, crooked but proud. So we don't forget night can still be kind, she said. I think she's right. Ronald writes letters now, once a week, mailed, not texts, not emails. Real handwriting, careful, awkward. He tells her about the books he's reading in therapy, about how he's learning to listen. He never asks to see her. He just says he hopes she's safe and happy. She doesn't write back yet, but she keeps the letters. That's enough for now. Nancy hasn't reached out again. I think she's still waiting for the next chapter to begin without her having to write it. Some people think time will redeem them by default. It doesn't. You have to stand up. You have to speak, even when your voice shakes. I didn't know that for most of my life. I thought being good meant being quiet. That if I loved hard enough, long enough, things would soften. People would see. But love without boundaries is just an invitation to be stepped over. And silence doesn't protect you. It buries you. I don't say this as a victim. I say it as someone who finally came back to herself, one hard-earned inch at a time. There's a photo on the fridge now, Jenny, holding a sunflower almost taller than her. Her face is wide open in it, no tension around the mouth, no shadow in the eyes. Just light. Sometimes I catch myself staring at it when the kettle's boiling, not because I forget, but because I remember. Every moment was worth it. Every no I said. Every door I didn't open. Every line I refused to blur. And if you're reading this, if you've ever been told to stay quiet, to not make trouble, to endure just a little more, let this be your reminder. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to change the story, even if your hands shake as you hold the pen, especially then.